Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get a little bit of a soft start as we have people kind of come in and join us. But I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar, Beyond Self-Care. We really appreciate Leilani Mixera, our speaker today, coming to share this information and these opinions with us. I think that sometimes when we do our brown bag, we sometimes focus on those services, and then other times we focus on opening a dialogue. So sometimes the opinions expressed may or may not be in alignment with Mental Health America of Hawaii, but we do think it's important to invite people who can share and expand that dialogue when we talk about things like self-care. If you're interested in getting the PDF of the slides, please feel free to email us. I'll be dropping my email into the chat. And that way we can share that with you if you're interested. We will be recording today's webinar, and so it'll be hosted on our YouTube so that if you wanted to review it again or share it with someone who is planning on attending but just couldn't come because of their schedule, please feel free to. Anything that we post on our social media is absolutely there to share with the community members that are around us. With that being said, I wanted to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Very excited for Leilani Mexer. She's a licensed clinical social worker, therapist, grief and death worker, and she's a group facilitator. She's worked and volunteered in syringe exchange and overdose prevention for 14 years before starting their own private practice. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Leilani.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody who's here today, and to you folks who are watching this recording later. Also, welcome to my living room. I'm someone who I don't like using fake backgrounds, so you get to kind of see everything back there. And thank you so much to Mental Health America of Hawaii for this wonderful opportunity to share about this topic of workplace wellness. It's one I really care a lot about. So today what we're going to end up talking about is I'm going to talk about stereotypes of wellness in the workplace. We're going to talk about the importance of true workplace wellness and ways that we can make that a reality. And I put this in the chat, but if you have questions, I am going to leave time at the end for questions. So feel free to, type them down if they're burning in your brain and you want to make sure you get it out, but I probably won't get to it till the end. But thank you again so much for coming. And also just a quick warning, I'm going to be talking heavily from a place of working in social services and healthcare, because that is the lens that I work through. That is what the work that I've done. So if you work in other fields, some things might not resonate directly with you, but I do hope that the messages throughout do feel universal and you have things you can take away for your workplace. So that was a great introduction about me. I don't have a ton more to say, but yes, I did work and volunteer for 14 years in syringe exchange and overdose prevention before starting my own private practice. Just this past September is when I decided to do it. So it hasn't been that long, but it's been wonderful working for myself. And the lens I'm coming from today too is that I have been in the workforce for 26 years. And I have worked exclusively in nonprofits since I was 19 years old until I started my own private practice. For context, I'm about to turn 42. So it's been a while that I've worked just in nonprofits. So I do feel like I have a lot of experience looking at the dynamics in that type of workplace. But the best part about working for myself, to be honest, is that I can be very honest today about what I truly think about workplace wellness. So hopefully y'all benefit from that. So what actually do we think when you hear the phrase workplace wellness? It's, there's a lot of stereotypes, right? When you hear workplace wellness, you're like, okay, what does that mean? What do we think? So I did an internet search of the term workplace wellness. And this is the type of stuff that came up, right? So, these are stock photos, obviously, but this is what most of the stock photos looked like. So I picked a couple choice ones for y'all that I thought were a good representation of what many people might answer when they think of the term in the workplace, right? So eating right, exercise, that's usually the self-care and workplace wellness messages we get. Here's a couple more that that came up, and these are kind of funny, people sitting on their desk, but more exercise And then, in the corner, we got some essential oils for good measure. One interesting thing of note that when I look up workplace wellness, most stock photos, most posts, most of these things are about working in an office. So white collar jobs. I guess, we don't see workplace wellness as something that pertains to frontline staff and people who work in the field. Truly, it's seen as something you do around the office. And then we also have initiatives for workplace wellness that are like food related, right? So here we have a waffle bar and a pizza party, which honestly, I hope this picture was pre-COVID because just looking at it is making me nervous that many people close together eating without a mask on. But here's the thing. So free food is great, right? We love it. We all need to eat. Free lunch is great, but giving your staff lunch once in a while is not actually true workplace wellness. And it's not what they want. And in fact, if this is what your workplace is doing, there are plenty of places on the internet where your workplace is being maybe lightly made fun of at best, but absolutely torn to shreds on the internet at worst. There's so many similar memes to these ones that I'm sharing that it was actually hard to choose. But the gist of it is that, throwing a pizza party for staff, for workplace wellness, for bonding is such a trope that there's memes all over the internet saying, oh my gosh, please, this is not what we're actually asking for. This isn't what we need. So, all workers want workplaces to better their material conditions, but often what they're offered are band-aids to make them a little less unhappy. So these are two screenshots. One is from a BuzzFeed article about perks employers offer instead of actually paying their employees well. And this is a tweet that I screenshot from the font. To me, I'm betting that's a New York Times article. But basically, it's nice that these perks are offered, but this is not what people want. And they're saying it very publicly. And in some workplaces, it's actually so bad that they probably would have preferred a pizza party to what they actually got, right? So I'm going to give a couple examples of real workplace wellness perks that employers tried and kind of failed at. This is one that somebody shared on Twitter about their workplace offering free massages. And I say free in quotes because there was a very badly thought out requirement that you had to make up the time lost from getting the massage. So their employer was very shocked that nobody wanted it, right? But it's not exactly a free massage, is you have to stay late to work to make up the time that happened. So that was kind of a fail on their end. And this one you may have actually seen because it's still making the rounds on the internet. In California, there's a hospital in the Bay Area that for Nurse Appreciation Week, a year into a pandemic, they showed their appreciation with rocks. And I, do not know what was going through the minds of people that thought that folks working probably overtime every day, crying in their cars at lunch because of what they were seeing would want a rock for nurse appreciation, right? I'm surprised that they didn't collectively get thrown through somebody's window. And then this one was from a gem of a subreddit. And I love this subreddit. It's called Anti-Work. And it's where a lot of people go to share the absolutely bananas things that happen to them at their jobs, to give evidence that, we're hurtling towards a dystopian nightmare in some workplaces. This one was a workplace had their staff, it was mandatory to sign a positivity pledge. As you can see, it had things like, I am better, not bitter. My resilience carries me through setbacks. I fail forward towards future success. And this was mandatory to sign. Not sure how they thought that was a good idea and that would work out for them other than their employees posting it on the internet to make fun of it. And absolutely the worst thing, my last example of these sort of things, Absolutely the worst thing I found was a workplace that boasted outwardly to the public about their employee assistance fund. And this fund raised money for employees in need. So the kicker is that actually they got all this great publicity. Look at us, we do this stuff for our workers, but no money from the fund actually came from the workplace. It was all fundraised and by the employees. They were pressured to donate to it by their employer, and they didn't actually give any money to it. So fellow employees where all the funds came from. And that is honestly probably the fakest workplace wellness initiative that I've ever come across. So social media, news articles, everywhere you look, you're seeing people lifting the veil on the indignities of what workplace wellness can look like. And even TV has nailed it. So I wanted to share a sec about this show, Severance. If you haven't seen it, I 100% recommend it if you are okay with violence in your entertainment. If you're not, it might not be the show for you because it can get a little violent. But this is an article excerpt from the Huffington Post, and the show is about a dystopian workplace. But they even then making fun of on the show the different types of workplace wellness initiatives that you can get, even offering waffle parties that may or may not be a euphemism for something a little weirder, but the show really blatantly makes fun of workplace wellness initiatives that they know have failed. While some workplaces absolutely know what they're doing is a slap in the face to their workers and they don't care, there are many workplaces that mean well, and they're really trying, but they're just not reading the room and they're not listening to their employees. So here's an example of that. We're feeling pressured, we're having a hard time. How about yoga, right? So some places might mean well, but they're not really doing what workers need. So what does real workplace wellness actually look like, right? We're going to talk a little about that. But before we talk about that in depth, I do want us to get on the same page about something that I think is actually really important to talk about before we talk about workplace wellness. And that is why people work at their jobs. And I know that might sound like a weird starting point, but one reason that why conversations about workplace wellness don't actually start from an honest place in the beginning is because employees and managers are not on the same page. And a very important thing to say out loud is that people aren't at their workplaces for the same reason. Often a common line that I've heard in many workplaces is that we're all family, right? Oh, this is our ohana. We're all in the same boat or the same canoe. And this makes the assumption that employees all feel the same way about even being at their job. So for the next two slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about just try to lay bare some of the most common reasons why people work at a job. So we're on the same page about that. So here's some reasons people might work with you. They might have been attracted to your organization specifically because yours is an org serving the population they want to work with. Now, especially in Hawaii, this is a thing because there are certain populations that there may only be a couple organizations that serve them. Some islands, there's one. You're the only game in town, right? So it's the only place that works with transgender youth. You really want to work with that population. You're going to try to work at that organization, right? Similarly, yours might be the only organization that has a specific job that they want to do. For example, my last job, I ran the statewide syringe exchange. It was the only syringe exchange in the statewide. If I wanted to work at a syringe exchange, I had to work at that job. Obviously, I worked there for other reasons. I liked it, but also truly, if I wanted to do that specific job, I didn't really have a choice where I worked. Some people genuinely like their workplace. And that is fantastic. That is wonderful if that's the place where you're at. Also, maybe you were just hiring and they needed a job. that can be the case, especially with the economy being so bad. Also, maybe your org has really good benefits, and that is a perk that some people truly look for. It's something important to them, especially if maybe they have a chronic illness, they need great healthcare. And also, one thing that I think a lot of people don't want to talk about is that some jobs are hard to get fired from. And when you've worked in the same community long enough, you actually start to hear things about different agencies, including things like who is desperate enough to keep bodies on their staff, regardless of their performance. That can be attractive to some people. And so, whether we want to admit it or not, some places do have that reputation of being hard to get fired from. Sometimes people just think the job's cool or it makes them look good. Honestly, from working in social services for so long at multiple jobs, I've had more than one coworker that loved to brag about the work that they did in the place they worked, but actually didn't do their jobs. And some people, honestly, the job is just a job. Truly, there are people who see their work life as something they can absolutely separate from who they are. That does not, and it doesn't matter what the job is. There are some people that absolutely could do any job, and I envy them, to be honest, to be able to separate so well. Some people may hate working there. They actually hate their job, but for whatever reason, they can't leave right now. A really common one I've seen is that they're close to retirement. So someone could be absolutely miserable at work, but they got 1 year left to go and they're going to stick it out. Maybe they're making everyone around them miserable too, but they ain't leaving. And lastly, there are people that do not like to work in general. And it doesn't matter what your workplace is like, you're not going to change their mind, right? So it absolutely depends on the individual person, how they handle themselves around these things. Someone might absolutely despise their job and you just wouldn't know it. They would never show that. But and some people just can't stop talking about it every day, how miserable they are at their job, right? But the important thing is that regardless of why people are there, the structure of the workplace itself will be what is important in creating wellness, because it can't be placed on the individual workers. Because as people come and go from a job, as their relationship to the job either improves or sours, so will the dynamics between them. And so you actually need to build wellness into the actual infrastructure of a workplace and make it the culture of the workplace, because it has to be that way regardless of who's working there and the reasons that they're working there. If you put it on the individuals to create workplace wellness, it changes based on who comes and goes and how they feel about the place. But if it's built into the structure, it will actually change something or change things for the better for the staff. So regardless of the whys, I want to note that all employees still have a fundamental responsibility at their job. And I bring that up because I'm talking about, it's, people workplaces, and it's okay to not like your job. It's okay if you work somewhere you feel stuck or you dislike working in general, but not if you're in a line of work where that indifference harms people and the communities. So I mentioned earlier, I'm coming from a place of talking to mostly from a social service perspective. So I feel like I have the duty to say that staff do still have the duty to do their jobs, even if they're unhappy. To paraphrase Jeannie Little, who is one of my favorite therapists of all time, used to be my supervisor, you get paid to leave your stuff at the door. And we're humans, we're not robots, and we bring who we are to work. But if you work in a job that serves others, they're the priority. Someone comes to you to get housing and you talk their ear off about your own problems because you're having a bad day, or you're thinking about something else, your own stuff, and you don't fill out their paperwork or turn it in, you're actually making things about you and not the people you serve. And staff have they have the duty to do those jobs, whether they're unhappy or not. And what I say to that is, if you're so unhappy that you actively hurt the people you serve by not doing your job, you got to get accommodations. Maybe you're depressed, you need accommodations, take FMLA, take care of yourself, get better if you can. You might want to switch the role you have, or find another line of work that's not in social services or healthcare, we are here to do no harm. You can absolutely go find a job where you can screw off and not further harm already vulnerable people. So that's where employee responsibility comes in the workplace. But what are the duty from the employer, from the organizations and the management perspective, right? When you work in jobs, what is what's the obligation of management? Well, first of all, their job is to make a workplace as inclusive and equitable as possible for all the employees that work there. So we talked about employees' duties, but the thing is, what is an important thing about the difference between management and employees? We're not all in the same boat. And we need to stop lying to ourselves about that. We are having very different experiences as each other, depending on what role we have in a job. The workplace experience for frontline staff is not the same as people who have management or administrative roles. They are wildly different experiences. For one, managers often make way more money. This absolutely colors how they feel about their workplace. And if you make a living wage, but the staff under you don't, you do not feel the same way about working there, and you can't pretend that you do. Also, something often not talked about is behavioral privilege, which changes everything for managers, meaning that they have the ability to work from home. I've seen a lot of managers make appointments midday and just say, oh, I'm going to the dentist, I'm going to work from home the rest of the day. They get personal errands done, take a longer lunch. And this may add to the joy that they get from their job. This may make them much happier at work, but they're not living the same reality of staff with less flexible roles. So often management not only get paid more, but they also have freedom that makes their lives easier in the day-to-day. And that must be acknowledged when we're talking about the dynamics of the workplace. We are not all in the same boat. We are not having the same experience as each other. So what else can workplaces do to become more equitable? One thing is organizations really need to work on being more transparent about compensation. Many jobs, especially in Hawaii, do not put salary in job ads. And if they don't do that, they have to at least put a realistic pay scale and not bait and switch. So that happens a lot here. People will say, oh, we have a quote competitive pay. And if that's what they put, it probably isn't. What do they have to hide by not putting it? Years ago, I applied for a job and they even asked me what salary range I was looking for. I told them, they didn't respond to that. Should have been a red flag. Drove from town windward for the job interview. They waited to the end to tell me it was a minimum wage job. They absolutely had every opportunity to tell me, but they were hoping I would show up and want the job badly enough to take it, even though it paid $8 an hour less than what I had asked them for. And they were like, oh, okay, when I said it on the phone, right? So there's a lot of bait and switch that happens here to try to get people in the door. I've also seen people do things like, oh, this is the salary. This happened to me at my last job in California. They offered me a salary. I accepted the position, and then they offered me a couple $1,000s less. They waited till they knew I would take the job regardless, because I wanted to work there very badly. And they gave me a lesser salary. So people need to be realistic and transparent about compensation. It's one of the first ways that you can create real workplace wellness for your staff. Also, paying workers a living wage. And if you can't, you can do things like giving people less hours to work with the same pay and benefits. So for example, maybe you can't give people a raise, but you change it to a 4-day work week. If you can't do anything like that, we got to rethink our business models. There is no reason that people should be working in social services, working any job, and not being able to pay their rent and not having a living wage. There's no reason for it. We have to rethink how we run businesses if that's what's happening. And also look at how much more does management make than frontline staff. Is it $50,000 more, $100,000 more? In some agencies, that's the case. And also, not always is pay equitable between departments. Some departments in an agency get paid way less, even managers get paid way less. Truly, we have to be transparent about that and talk about equity in the workplace. Also, something that happens a lot in organizations is overworking staff. Organizations should not put impossible standards on its employees. If a job can't be done in under 40 hours a week, instead of, just being like, oh, you're salaried, you got to work 60, which has happened to me at multiple jobs. You got to hire more people to do the job. If you're working 60 hours a week and you're miserable, the workplace wellness initiative, like giving someone some pizza, is just a slap in the face, right? You got to actually make the conditions of the workplace better. Also, if someone leaves and you eliminate that position, which I've also seen done at many jobs, where they're like, oh, we can save some money by not hiring for that job again. You actually have to eliminate the tasks that were done by that job or hire someone else. Don't put it on someone else's job. Don't add a job to someone else's just to save money. I've seen that happen a bunch of times, and it makes workers miserable. Also, on a lot of job descriptions, it'll say other tasks as needed, in quotes. And that usually is put on a job description to mean random things that cannot always be accounted for in a job description. Like, there's just too many little things that come up. So, for example, you have to go to the post office once in a while. Like, that's understandable. That's another task is needed. But oftentimes at jobs, people get things continuously added to their job, like just tons of tasks, until what they were told their job was when they were hired doesn't even resemble the original job that they were hired for. And that causes a lot of stress and harm in the workplace. And lastly, on this slide, don't pile on the work onto employees that seem like they can, quote, handle it. I've seen the best employees I've ever worked with burn out and leave jobs because they were the most competent, the most dedicated, and they were taken advantage of. They were just asked to do things over and over until they broke. Also, something that happens a lot in jobs is that people are given time off. They're given PTO, but when they try to take it, management is like, oh my God, no, we need you. You can't do that. You have a problem if people can't take their time off. And if you're guilting people not to do it, people need a break, right? But this happens a lot at jobs. Also, some reminders of employees. I'm talking a lot about the management side, in terms of creating a culture in the workplace that makes you feel more comfortable and less harmed. I gotta say, it's not wrong or illegal to talk about your pay with your coworkers. I'm seeing this alarming trend more and more on different places on the internet, where in lunchrooms, management might be posting flyers that say, don't talk about your pay in the workplace, you'll get fired, you'll get in trouble, when that's actually illegal. So workers can absolutely work on creating a culture where we openly discuss our salaries, the hierarchy in the workplace. Normalizing these things make people feel that the workplace is transparent and makes them feel good about working together. And also it helps get rid of inequity. For example, talking to coworkers at different jobs is absolutely how I found out I made less than them. As a woman of color, as a woman in general, I've found out I've made much less than my male coworkers. So please talk about this stuff openly and make, it more normalized in the workplace with your coworkers. Also, challenge the notion that your workplace is your family, because talking about it in that way actually pushes employees to do work for free willingly, because you feel like you have to. It gets you feeling like you have to turn the other way when things are bad, like you should just be grateful for your job because it could be worse. And people can be very exploited when the workplace is like, oh, but we're a family, you would do this for your family, right? You're allowed to have a work-life balance that does not include being told how important your job is to you by other people. That's other people putting what their standards are for how you interact in the workplace. And one thing I've thought many times when this has happened, because I've had several workplaces where they're like, we're family, we're family. I don't even get along with my family. I'm not going to do extra stuff for people that treat me bad in my regular life. Certainly, if you're treating me bad, I'm not going to do extra work for you unpaid. One thing also that we don't talk about enough is moral distress. So if you haven't heard about this term before, I'm actually really obsessed with moral distress. It is a topic I love to talk about because I realize that this has happened to me in many jobs. Side note, if you don't go to the annual Pain and Palliative Care Conference put on by Queens, I absolutely recommend it. It's my favorite conference every year. And I was so stoked that earlier this month, not one, but two different speakers actually brought up the topic of moral distress. One of them being Dr. Anthony Back, who wrote an excellent book on communicating with people who are seriously ill. And I loved his definition that he used. There's tons of great definitions, but this one I really liked. Moral distress is a psychological harm arising when people are forced to make or witness decisions or actions that contradict your core moral values. So basically, the lack of fit between your morals and your environment can cause distress. And we're inundated with this stress daily in so many different aspects of our lives. So many situations come up daily where our moral values don't fit what's happening around us. But there are ways that workplaces can mitigate that for its employees. For one, there should be a fit in what an org says it does and actually what it does and how it operates. So, orgs shouldn't be telling people they treat their employees well when they don't. They shouldn't be advertising to the world that they're run a certain way when they're not. You got to walk the talk, because hypocrisy is not a good motivator for employee happiness. And it's one of the things that can absolutely sour the workplace. Moral distress can have a lot of negative emotions attached to it. But one thing I really want to emphasize, that for people feeling moral distress in the workplace, it may be very isolating because not everybody sees the situation in the same way. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier with people are in the workplace for different reasons. So I think this is crucial to remember in this case, because moral distress is going to weigh more heavily on people who came to work for an employer because they really believed in the workplace, really agreed with its mission, and they're seeing things done differently. So it might affect them very greatly, but not a coworker. And the reason that's important is because I've seen situations where someone will bring up something happening in the workplace that they find distressing, and then another coworker or more than one might be like, I don't think that's a problem, whatever. And management has been like, oh, see, it's not a problem because this person doesn't think it's a problem. But they might think very differently about the workplace, and moral distress is not something that's affecting them. So you really have to pay attention to what's going on collectively. And making the workplace more equitable for everyone, not just based on what one or two people think. So how can we minimize moral distress in the workplace specifically? By treating staff and the people you serve in a way that aligns with your values. That includes, like I mentioned, what you pay and also how you distribute workload. Also, not trying to justify changes that go against your stated values and mission statement, or how the staff have been used to being treated in the past. And my example for this, if that might sound a little confusing, but organizations change, right? And they may start going in a direction that's very different than how they started or how people are used to the place being. So example I have is I worked in a very small nonprofit, just a couple people in California. And as we started getting more known, my boss became much more rigid, much more worried about what people thought of us. And one day I ate a banana during a staff meeting. Totally, there's like 6 employees. We've always eaten during meetings. And one day she just flipped out and was like, this isn't appropriate. It's not, it makes us look bad to eat meetings. We need to be more formal, and just went off, yelled about it. And then we kept the meeting going. And then afterwards, I'm talking with my coworkers. I was like, we've all eaten in staff meetings. She's never mentioned this before. if she'd had a conversation with us about, I want to change the direction and like the way we treat this workplace, that would be very different. You've got to talk openly if you're making changes, because I was just like, wow, this workplace is horrible now, and it was something so small that didn't have to happen, right? And then also know that what your staff faces in the larger picture is also causing moral distress. So look at ways you can buffer that in the workplace for them, making the workplace as humane as possible, especially because we are 2 years into a pandemic that's absolutely not over. We are in an inhumane world. How do we treat each other like humans? And then also listen to staff. And I mean, like truly listen to and take their ideas into account. Management doesn't actually always know best. It's something I've dealt with at a few jobs where I stated what I needed, and I work differently. People work differently, and I wasn't listened to. One example is I have to leave blank spaces in my day. I'm not somebody who can work an 8-hour day that's back-to-back activities and meetings with no break. I absolutely have to have time to think and plan, get ready for things, prep time. And prep time and thinking time is actual work, but sometimes it's not treated as such because you always have to be doing something. I've had situations where I had a half hour between meetings on purpose, and someone went into my calendar. They're like, "Oh, you had a free half hour, so I added this phone call with someone real quick on your calendar." I can't work like that. And you got to be understanding that everyone works differently and you don't always know what's best for them. And also, we got to consider accommodations in the workplace for people who are neurodivergent, for people who are introverts. Not everybody's the same. One example is team building exercises are often brought in for workplace wellness, thinking they're fun, which can actually be hell for some people, very hellish. Or people might have different issues around stuff like that. I had a workplace that really wanted to take us kayaking for a day. They thought it'd be team building, and all I can think was being stuck in the middle of nowhere on the water with other people sounds one of the worst things I can possibly imagine, right? So not everybody works the same. We got to also just be flexible about how we do things. Like giving people the freedom to choose how they do a task, that the task will still get done if it's done differently than how you do it. If they do it a different way, that's okay, right? So just being flexible. So workplace wellness is not actually small things that make people feel good for a day. It's made up of fundamental changes to the workplace that make a place actually a good place to work. In order to create true wellness in a business, you must do an honest audit of the day-to-day practices that uphold white supremacy, ableism, misogyny, fat phobia. We have to do the hard work, because if it's easy, it doesn't change anything real. And honestly, I started off with my slides, I could have done a whole workshop on ways that we uphold white supremacy in the workplace and the values of white supremacy. Like, it's insidious and it comes up in ways that you may not even think about on a daily basis, right? But it's there, and we have to do a very honest audit of our workplaces to root these things out. And if you think that all of this sounds unrealistic, I actually have a lot of examples of workplaces that treat their employees like this. And I'm going to talk about one real quick, and then we'll have time for questions soon. This is an org, a screenshot of their website of an org called Free From, and they're pretty great. They're based in California, and from their mission statement, they work with survivors of violence to help build wealth and financial security, and they practice what they preach. As you can see at the bottom, they actually post their minimum salary on their website, which starts off at $80,000 a year for full-time employees. They absolutely post it for everybody to see. They also share why they do what they do, including being transparent that actually paying well benefits them even. With the very bottom line, number 4, talking about underpaying staff cost nonprofits money and productivity gaps, rehiring and training costs, which you can actually avoid by paying people well in the first place. How many nonprofits have you seen or worked for that the turnover is horrendous? It actually loses tons of money that could have been avoided if you paid better. They also share their benefits online, which I'm not going to go over all of them. You can go to their website yourself. But one really cool one that I'd like to note, and I know this is not realistic for everybody for sure, but I thought it was pretty cool that, when people aren't taking vacation and they notice, they actually give a vacation stipend to their staff to try to get them to go on vacation. So if you can prove that you booked a vacation that was for more than 1 or 2 nights away from your home, they will give you, I think it's a $1,500 stipend to take a vacation, because they know that a rested worker will be happier and better at their jobs. So my hope for this presentation was to have an honest conversation about what real wellness in the workplace is, because all of the talk about self-care this and self-care that was driving me to the edge, to be honest. It was making me very unhappy hearing about it constantly. And I literally asked Mental Health America of Hawaii if I could do this workshop, just so I could get people talking to each other about why self-care in the workplace is actually not what we need. And I wanted to share this quote, and then I have 2 more slides. And this is a quote from an artist that I follow on Instagram called Bry. Western self-care is a cruel capitalist scam that dumps the responsibility on individuals to be healthy in a profoundly sick society. Imagine the arrogance required to coach people on how to grow a healthy tree inside a forest that they stole and then literally set on fire. But all this was a 1-hour mental health webinar. I didn't give you all of the answers to fixing your toxic workplaces, but I hope that I at least shifted the conversation for folks, gave you something to think about, to take back to your workplace. And all that was saying, not all your workplaces are toxic, but we do have a lot of burnout by toxic work culture. And we do have some time for questions, but also if you have any comments that you wanted to share directly with me, or that you didn't want to share here, maybe you have feedback that you didn't want to give in front of everybody else because it's positive or negative, or if you want to hire me to support your staff or give out a recommendation for a therapist, here's my email and website. And thank you so much for your time. We have about 15 minutes left. I guess I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And there we go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leilani. I think that you brought so many wonderful points up. I was literally taking some notes myself and found the whole concept of like moral distress so fascinating, having seen it played out in some of my workplaces as well. I mean, I think that you really highlighted how there are so many differences for why people come into employment, stay in employment, also leave employment, and having to think about those as we start to look at workplace wellness. The highlight from the past 2 years has been, instead of thinking people, leave everything at home and come in and just do the job, what we've started to really start to embrace is the idea that we're people, and that comes into the job as well. So I think that, you really started an amazing conversation. So we do have time for questions and answers. If anyone has some, please feel free to drop that into the chat or to the Q&A box. And so that we can answer those for you.
Thank you. Also, just FYI, and I'm laughing because I know this is being recorded, my cat is freaking out. So if it looks like I'm petting a cat, I am petting a cat. She was screaming and I was like, okay, I'll pick you up, man. So
they have their moments. I have them as well.
All right. Yeah, any questions? And obviously you can tell by the way I talk that I will talk about anything, answer anything. So please don't be afraid to ask.
I did want to remind everyone that we will be recording today's session. And so what we do is we upload that, do a little bit of editing, upload it onto YouTube. And when we do the follow-up email, we include that recording into the email so that you can share it and that you can provide it to people who may want to attempt but just weren't able to. I also want to include our survey that's in the chat. It's really helpful for us. It's how we kind of come up with these ideas. We get all this input about what people want to talk about, and this is definitely one of those topics that came in from this survey. But if you have ideas about different things that you'd like to share or want to provide feedback on today's training, please feel free to drop that into the survey. That will also be there for the follow-up email. I'll include it there. Oh, we have a comment from somebody. We have personally hired Leilani to provide support groups for our team, and it has been amazing. It is awesome.
Hi, Sam. I was like, oh, you're here. That's awesome. Thanks for coming. Yeah, thank you. I also see another question from Cassie in the Q&A. Any tips on how to start conversations on addressing moral distress in the workplace? Ooh, that's a good question. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to start with a caveat that, of course, I'm going to sit here and be like, just talk openly about it. But that's not the first step, actually, because one of the problems is a lot of people don't trust their workplace. Like, even when a manager is, it's pretty cool compared to lots of other bosses, and they're like, oh, you can trust me. People have had so many bad experiences in workplace that maybe every single job they've ever had, they had a manager that dismissed their feelings, that wasn't supportive. They come to work for you and they can't trust you right off the bat. I know that's absolutely happened to me as a manager. That people, I'd be like, oh no, it's okay if you tell me you're sick, you take time off, and it's like, what, are you sure? No, I'm coming in anyway. I don't know if you're telling the truth. When I first started as a manager, people have a lot of trauma from past experiences in workplaces. So, I want to give you advice. So, like, to start the conversation, but it's not always that easy. You've got to build the trust in your workplace in general by following through with things you say you're going to do, by telling people it's okay if they speak freely and be honest, and not actually, giving them issues if they do. Because I've seen that happen too, where they're like, no, tell me what you think. I really want honest feedback. And when you give that honest feedback, they're just like, and you get penalized sometimes. People take it personally. So truly the first thing to do is really just build that trust in the workplace so that people trust you when it comes to making big changes. And so, but I think talking about moral distress, even just bringing it up, planting the seed in like a staff meeting or one-on-one, if you do individual supervision with a staff that you think might be feeling it, if you're recognizing it in them, ask if they've ever heard of the term before. To me, once you hear a term, you see it everywhere. So when I first heard the term, then I was like, oh, moral distress. But I got to remind myself it's not as widespread as I think it is. And even just asking people if they've heard it, it can start the conversation about what might be going on with them. So I hope that answered okay. Please feel free to ask for clarifying stuff if it didn't.
Excellent. We have another question that is in chat. Yeah, Cassie says yes. The question is, how can we encourage nonprofits to better respect their own advocates, e.g. only allowed to advocate so far? Mahalo for any manal.
That's a great question, but can I ask a clarifying question? Do you mean advocating for things within the organization or advocating in the community, or both? And that's okay if it takes, both. Okay. Ooh, only going so far. So do you mean like they're told it's okay, but then it's like, oh, not like that, or not? you said this. Okay, mostly for clients. Oh, that's a good question. I've seen that happen a lot. I think one of the hardest things about working in social services, and this is really where I'm going to say the caveat again, this is my personal opinion. I do not speak for Mental Health America of Hawaii, because it might be a little out there, but we are absolutely beholden to the limits of capitalism, right? So like, we want to be advocates for the folks that we serve in social services. And unfortunately, there are limits that are real. And then there's limits that are imposed upon us by our workplaces because of funding, where we get it, the types of funding we have, and who we have to answer to for what we do with that money. Lots of different things make it so what the people we serve truly need will never get met because of false limitations put on us. And so that's a really hard balancing act, that we want to do what clients actually need, what our program participants actually need. But the limits are there. So it's up to your organization and your management to know where you're willing to bend, where you're willing to push those limits. Because unfortunately, the people that fund us, we get our money from, aren't always understanding what people truly need to be done for them. Any other questions?
Excellent. That was the follow-up is mahalo for that great answer. We do have time for a couple more questions if you have them. Please feel free to drop those into the chat.
Yeah, or ask, or if you want me to clarify anything, or if you want to know where I got a meme you liked. And you know what's so wild about that is there are so many similar things and conversations that I see every day on the internet, that even in the last couple of days I saw things like, oh, I need to add another slide, oh, I want to add that, but it would have absolutely gone over an hour if I did. But these conversations are absolutely happening out there. You just gotta look for them. All right.
I don't see any other questions coming in, but if any do come in, please feel free to, you can contact us and we'll directly send it over to Leilani. But you'll also be getting a follow-up email that will give you some of the information. It will give you the recording and then of course, our survey. If you are interested in a PDF of the slide deck, you can also let us know and we'll go ahead and provide that. But again, yes, we echo that that I'm seeing in the chat, appreciating the honest conversation, bringing up some really difficult points. I think that, you know, for those of us privileged to work in a really healthy workplace, that some of those like kind of smaller pieces are just like added on benefits, added on sprinkles. But when you get to a conversation about a workplace that definitely needs a lot more support and help, then those don't have the same effect. And being able to conversate about that and what's really needed by employees is so important, especially right now. So we just want to say a very big warm mahalo to you, Leilani, for coming, starting that dialogue and getting that out there. But thank you everyone for coming today. We look forward to seeing you in future trainings. Mahalo.
Cool.